Cole Merritt was not a man who complained. He had learned early in life that complaining changed nothing and wasted energy that could be spent on more useful things. 6 years in the Galactic Defense Corps had made that lesson permanent. He had survived 3 border skirmishes, 2 crash landings, and 1 very bad week, trapped inside a disabled gunship with nothing but protein bars and old music to keep him company. He had never once filed a complaint, but standing in General Petra Oksana's office and listening to his new assignment, he felt the urge rise up for the first time in a long while. Bodyguard job, he said. A personal protection assignment, Petra corrected without looking up from her desk. There is a difference. What's the difference? The pay grade. She finally looked up. She was a compact woman with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too many things to be surprised by much. The Sorvani Empire has requested a human guardian for Princess Veya. The Queen herself made the request. She wants someone with no ties to Sorvani. Court politics, no faction loyalty, no personal agenda inside the Empire. Why human specifically? Because every Sorvani noble she has hired for the job has eventually chosen their own interest over the princess. 3 of them were found to be reporting to rival factions. 1 disappeared entirely. Petra set down her pen. We are neutral. Ground Cole, that is what she needs right now. Cole thought about that for a moment. It made sense in the blunt and uncomfortable way that most things in his line of work made sense. He was not thrilled, but he understood. How old is the princess? He asked. 14 by Sorvani count, closer to 16 in human years. And the Queen? Queen Sorala rules the largest empire in this sector of the galaxy. She has held the throne for 22 years and has never lost a political battle in that time. Petra gave him a look. Do your job, keep the princess safe and stay out of court drama. Cole accepted the assignment. He always did. He arrived at the Sorvani diplomatic station 2 days later, carrying a single bag and the kind of quiet professional calm that had kept him alive through things that should have killed him. The station was large and full of the kind of ornate detail that said money had never been a concern. High-arched corridors, walls inlaid with dark stone, lights that seemed to glow from inside the ceiling itself rather than from any visible source. A Sorvani attendant led him to the princess's wing without speaking. The silence felt intentional. He had read the briefing files on Sorvani culture during trip over. They were a proud people, deeply formal in public, deeply private in personal matters. Physical height was associated with status, and nearly every Sorvani he passed was taller than him by at least a head. Their skin came in shades of blue and silver. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with the kind of effortless precision that came from generations of careful physical training. Princess Veya was waiting in her sitting room. She was tall for her age, which in human terms meant she was already nearly as tall as Cole, and she would likely pass him in another year or 2. Her skin was a pale silver blue, her eyes the color of dark water, and her hair was deep blue-black, braided back with thin copper chains woven through it. She wore simple clothes by Sorvani noble standards, which still meant fabric that probably cost more than Cole's monthly pay. She looked at him the way someone looks at a piece of furniture that has been placed in a room without their permission. You are the human, she said. Her standard was clean and precise, with the musical accent that all Servani seemed to carry. Cole Merritt, he said, I'll be your guardian for the duration of your stay here. I do not need a guardian, I know, he said. Most people who actually need one say that. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She had not expected that. Cole had learned from the briefing files that Servani royals communicated displeasure in very controlled ways. A narrowed eye was actually a fairly significant reaction. My previous guardians were all highly trained Servani warriors, she said. I also heard they all left when things got complicated. He kept his voice even. I don't leave. There was a pause. She was looking at him differently now, not warmly, but with something that was maybe closer to curiosity than the flat dismissal she had started with. What makes you different from them? She asked. I have no stake in your empires. Politics, he said. I don't have faction. I don't have family in your court. I don't have ambitions that depend on who your mother is friendly with this month. I'm just here to do a job. And what is the job in your own words? Make sure nothing bad happens to you, he said simply. She was quiet for a moment, and she turned away and looked out the window at the dark spread of space beyond the station, and Cole had the clear impression that the conversation was over. He took up a position near the door and said nothing more. That first evening she tested him 4 times. She walked quickly through crowded corridor to see if she could lose him in the foot traffic. She slipped through a side door during a diplomatic reception. She took a route through the lower maintenance levels that no attendant had shown him. She stood very still in a dark hallway for 10 full minutes to see if he would give up waiting. He was behind her through all of it, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to lose sight. When she finally turned and looked at him in that dark hallway, he simply raised his eyebrows and waited. For the first time, something that was almost a smile crossed her face. It was brief and carefully controlled, but it was there. You are stubborn, she said. Yes, he agreed. My third guardian used to lose me within the first hour. He sounds like he was bad at his job. This time the almost smile lasted a full second before she shut it down. She did not try to lose him after that. She also did not try to talk to him much, but Cole had not expected that. He was not here to be her friend. He was here to be the one person in this station whose only purpose was to make sure she stayed safe. That he could do what he did not know yet, standing in that dark corridor watching the princess walk ahead of him with her copper-braided hair and her careful, proud silence, was that in 3 weeks everything on the station would be on fire, and the way he handled that fire would change the course of both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. But that was 3 weeks away. For now he followed, and she led him, and the station moved quietly through the dark between the stars. 3 weeks passed in a routine that Cole had quietly made his own. He woke before Vea. He walked her morning circuit through the station's upper corridors, always 3 steps behind, always watching the people they pass with the easy, unhurried attention of someone who had been trained to notice things without looking like he was noticing them. He ate when she ate, stopped when she stopped, and stood outside whatever room She was in with the patient stillness of someone who had learned long ago that waiting was just another part of the work. Vea did not speak to him much, but the quality of her silence had changed. In the first days it had been a cold silence, the kind meant to make a person feel invisible. Now it was more like the silence between two people who had simply run out of things to prove to each other. She stopped testing him after that first night. She stopped pretending he was not there. She even very occasionally said small things to him that were not questions or commands. On the 9th day, she had pointed out a constellation through the observation window and told him its Sorvani name. On the 14th day, she had asked him where on earth he was from, and when he said a small town in the middle of the country, she had asked what it looked like, and he had described the flat open land and the wide sky, and she had listened with her head slightly tilted the way she did when something genuinely interested her. On the 19th day, she had laughed at something he said, just once, brief and quiet but real. Cole noticed these things the way he noticed everything, carefully and without making a show of it. He did not tell himself they meant anything beyond the natural easing that happened when two people spend enough time near each other. She was a teenager, a long way from home, surrounded by people who wanted things from her family. He was a soldier doing a job, that was all it was. Still, when the attack came on the 22nd night, his body moved before his mind had finished processing the sound of the explosion, and the first thought in his head as he reached her door was not protect the asset the way the training said it should be. It was just her name. The blast shook the station hard enough to send things falling from shelves. Cole had the door opened in 2 seconds. Vea was already standing on the other side of it, dressed, eyes wide but focused, her chin up in the way she held it when she was frightened but refusing to show it. He had learned to read that look. How many? She asked quietly. I don't know yet. Stay close. I can fight. I have had combat training since I was 6. I know. Stay close anyway. She did. She fell in behind his left shoulder with a precision that told him her training had been genuinely serious, and they moved together through the corridor toward the emergency route he had memorized on his 2nd day at the station. They made it through the first junction and halfway down the 2nd corridor before the soldiers appeared. There were 4 of them, unmarked armor, but the weapons were Sorvani military issue, the kind that did not end up in civilian hands by accident. Cole took the first one down before the man had finished, raising his weapon. Fast, hard strike to the throat that put him on the floor without a sound. The second came from the left, and Cole caught him by the arm, used his own momentum against him, and drove him into the wall hard enough that he stayed there. The third fired. Cole did not calculate. He did not weigh the options or run the numbers. He simply moved, and the shot caught him across the upper left arm instead of hitting the person standing behind him. The heat of it was immediate and severe. The bolt had burned through his sleeve and into the flesh beneath, and his whole arm went briefly numb and then lit up with pain. He registered it the way he registered most pain in a fight, as information, not as something to stop for. He hit the third soldier twice and put him down. The fourth looked at the 3 men on the floor and made the sensible decision to run. Cole stood in the corridor with his arm bleeding and his breathing elevated, and The specific kind of post-fight stillness settling over him that always came when the immediate danger had passed and the body started adding up what it had spent. Vea stepped forward. She looked at his arm with an expression that was harder to read than her usual careful composure, something underneath it that was raw in a way he had not seen on her face before. You moved in front of the shot, she said. Yes, you did not have to do that. Yes, I did. His voice came out more simply than he intended, without the professional distance he usually kept around things like this. That's why I'm here, that's the whole point. She was quiet for a moment. The corridor lights were flickering from the blast damage further down the station, and in the unsteady light she looked younger than she usually managed to seem. Then she reached out and wrapped her fingers around his uninjured wrist. Cole had read about this gesture in the briefing files. He had not truly understood it until now. It was the grip used when a debt was too large for words, when the thing owed could not be named in any language, and so was acknowledged through touch. Instead, it was not a casual gesture. It was not done lightly. He stayed very still and let her hold it. My third guardian, she said quietly, stepped aside when the last incident happened. He was not hurt. He simply stepped aside. Cole said nothing. He said his personal safety was also part of his contract. He was wrong, Cole said. Her fingers tightened slightly on his wrist, just for a second. Then she let go and straightened, and her face settled back into its usual composed lines. And she said they should keep moving, and they did. Cole followed her through the rest of the station to the secure emergency wing, and he kept his face neutral, and he did not mention that his arm hurt significantly more than he was letting on, or that the thing that had moved him in front of that shot had not been training or protocol. It had been something much simpler and much harder to talk about. He had not wanted her to get hurt. Not in the professional sense, not in the mission success sense, just in the plain human sense of not wanting someone you had spent 3 weeks watching and listening to and quietly coming to know, to be hurt by something that you had the ability to stop. He cleaned the wound himself in the secure wing's small medical room, accepted the supplies Vea silently handed him one by one without being asked, and told himself it meant nothing beyond ordinary human feeling. He almost believed it. Outside, the station crew worked to seal the damaged sections and identify what had happened. Reports were already being sent to Queen Solera. Cole knew that within hours he would be standing in front of people far more powerful than himself, explaining the events of tonight. He was not looking forward to that. What he did not know yet was that the Queen had already received the full report, and that she had read the part about the shot 3 times, and that she was sitting in her chamber on the far side of the sector with an face that none of her polished by decades of light. Her eyes were amber-colored, warm in tone, but very precise in the way they moved. The eyes of someone who had spent a long time studying people and had become very good at it. She wore no crown. She did not need one. She looked at him for a long time without speaking. Cole held the look steadily. He was not going to be the one to speak first, and he was not going to look away. Not out of stubbornness, but because he had read enough to know That breaking eye contact first in Sorvani culture carried meaning he did not want to accidentally send. You took a weapon discharge meant for my daughter, she said at last. Her standard was perfect and musical, like someone who had learned it by choice rather than necessity and had taken the learning seriously. Yes, Cole said. Walk me through the moment exactly. He did. He described the corridor, the 4 soldiers, the sequence of the fight, and the shot. He described where he was standing and where Vea was standing and the angle of the weapon when it fired. He gave her the facts in order without decoration. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You did not calculate, she said. You did not weigh the risk to yourself against the risk to her and arrive at a tactical decision. No, he said. Why not? He thought about the careful answer, the professional answer, the answer that fit the context of an official audience with a foreign monarch. Then he gave her the true one. Because there wasn't time, and because even if there had been time, the answer would have been the same. She was behind me. The shot was coming. I moved. I wasn't going to let her get hit if I could stop it. Solara studied him. The Sorvani court has had a long debate, she said slowly, about whether humans are capable of what we call Verith. I'm sure the word is not in your briefing files. It does not translate cleanly. It means the quality of spending yourself for someone else without counting the cost, giving without the calculation of return. She let the word settle. Most of my advisors believe humans are too individually oriented to possess it. That your species values the self too highly. We do value the self, Cole said, but we also value the people next to us. Yes, she said very quietly, as if he had confirmed something she had already suspected. She rose from the chair. She was several centimeters taller than him when standing, and the movement had the kind of unhurried ease that said she was used to any room adjusting itself around her. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark for a moment, and Cole watched the side of her face and said, Nothing. My daughter has had 11 guardians, she said, not turning from the window. All Sorvani, all trained, all eventually more loyal to their own interests than to her. She paused. Do you know what Vea told me last night when I spoke with her about the attack? No. She turned then and looked at him. She said the human does not leave. She said it the way someone says something they cannot quite believe is real yet. Something moved in her expression. Something that was controlled but not entirely contained. My daughter has not trusted a guardian. In 2 years, she has been let down too many times, and in 1 month you have managed to be the thing those 11 trained warriors were not. Cole was quiet for a moment. I just did the job. No, Solara said. You did more than the job. That is exactly the point. She held his gaze for a long time. He noticed in the way he noticed everything that she was standing closer to the window now than when she had first stood, and that the formal distance she had entered the room with had quietly, incrementally, without any single identifiable moment, gotten smaller. He noticed it and did not say anything about it because he was not certain yet what it meant, and he had learned a long time ago not to name things before he understood them. You will attend the court dinner tomorrow evening, she said. It was not phrased as a question. Yes, Cole said, the court nobles will not be comfortable with you there. I imagine not. Does that concern you? He thought about it honestly. They, little, he said, but not enough to change anything. For the second time in the conversation, something moved behind her carefully. Composed expression. This time it stayed a moment longer, before she brought it back under control. Go back to your post, she said. Vea will have noticed your absence. He left the way he had come, walking back through the station corridors. He turned the conversation over in his mind with the same careful attention he gave to everything. The Queen was sharp. The Queen was watching. The Queen had asked questions that were not entirely about the attack. He filed that observation away, said nothing about it to anyone, and took his post back outside Vea's door without comment. The two station guards looked relieved to be dismissed. Inside the room, he heard the quiet sound of Vea's studies resuming. He stood straight, breathed steadily, and reminded himself that he was a soldier doing a job, and that the most important thing right now was keeping a 16-year-old girl safe on a station full of people who had already tried once to harm her. He almost managed to convince himself that was the only thing on his mind. The court dinner was held in the station's largest formal hall, a long room with walls of dark stone and lights set low in their fixtures so that everything was warm and shadowed and felt older than it was. Long tables ran the length of the space, set with the kind of careful precision that said someone had spent a full day arranging things exactly right. There were 43 Sorvani nobles present. Cole counted them the way he counted everything, quickly and without making it obvious. He was the only human in the room. He had dressed as well as his supplies allowed, which was to say that he was clean and his clothes were his best ones, and he had done what he could. Next to the Sorvani nobles in their layered formal wear with its complex fastenings and its deep colors, he was aware that he looked exactly like what he was, a soldier trying to pass in a room built for a very different kind of person. Vea found him near the entrance before the meal began. She looked at him briefly with the quick, precise attention she had used since the first week when she was assessing a situation. You look uncomfortable, she said quietly. I'm fine. You look uncomfortable, she said, again not unkindly. The court will try to read that. Keep your shoulders back, move slowly. The Sorvani associate hastened with low status. Cole looked at her. She was giving him advice on how to carry himself in her world with a matter-of-fact tone of someone who understood that the information was useful and that being useful was more important than pretending the information was not needed. He adjusted his posture. Better, he said. She studied him for a second. Better, she confirmed and moved to her seat. He found the place assigned to him. 3 seats down the table from Vea, and 4 seats from the nearest cluster of nobles who had already decided they were not going to acknowledge him. That was fine. He had not come to make friends. The meal itself was long by any measure. 7 courses, each one announced in formal Sorvani that he did not understand. Each one served with a ceremony that added 10 minutes to every dish. The food was unfamiliar. Some of it was good, some of it was not. Cole ate what was placed in front of him without reacting, because reacting to food in a formal Setting was a fast way to create an impression he did not want to create. The nobles watched him throughout. Not constantly, not rudely, but with the steady peripheral attention of people who were very used to gathering information from observation. He was a new thing in a room full of old things, and new things got watched. He watched them back, which he could tell some of them had not expected. At the far end of the table, Queen Solara said very little. She spoke when spoken to, responded to questions from her senior advisors with quiet precision, and fulfilled the duties of a formal dinner with the ease of someone who had done it hundreds of times and found it neither difficult nor interesting. But Cole noticed, with the careful attention he could not quite shut off, even in a social setting, that she looked at him, not constantly, not in any way that another person would easily catch, but in the spaces between conversations, when her attention had no official place to go, it went to him. He looked back once carefully just to confirm he was reading it correctly. She held the look for a moment with the unblinking Sorvani directness that still surprised him slightly. And then the senior advisor to her left asked her something, and she turned away. Cole looked back at his plate. After the meal, the nobles moved into quieter clusters, the way people at formal dinners always did when the obligation of sitting was over, and the freedom of standing restored their ability to choose who they talked to. Most of them chose not to talk to Cole, which suited him. He moved to a position near the wall, where he had a clear view of the room and Vea's location within it, and stood at the relaxed version of attention that looked like nothing to anyone who did not know what they were seeing. Old by Sorvani standards, with skin that had faded from silver to a pale gray-white, and eyes that were shrewd in the calculating way of someone who had spent a lifetime in court politics. "You are the human guardian," the noble said. "Cole Merritt." Cole said, "I know your name." The noble looked him over with an expression that was not quite contempt, but was standing close to it. "The Queen keeps unusual company these days. The Queen is thoughtful about her choices," Cole said, keeping his voice entirely even. "A polite answer." "I tend toward polite," Cole said. "It causes fewer problems." The noble studied him for a moment. "You do not seem like a man who frightens easily." "I frighten fine," Cole said. "I just don't let it stop me from doing what needs doing." The noble was quiet for a second, and then made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but acknowledged something. He moved away without another word. Two more nobles attempted versions of the same conversation over the next hour. Cole handled both of them the same way, with even-voiced honesty that was not aggressive but was not soft either. By the end of the evening, he had not made any friends among the court, but he had the impression that he had earned a cautious kind of respect from the ones who had bothered to test him. The ones who had not bothered were probably not worth worrying about. It was near the close of the evening that Solara stopped him. The other guests were filtering out. Vea had already left with her attendants, giving Cole a brief nod on her way past that said she was fine, and the evening was over, and he did not need to follow. Cole had taken her at her word and stayed to watch the room empty. Solara crossed toward him at an angle that looked casual and was not. "The court found you strange," she said. "I know. They think I am being sentimental." keeping a human guardian, elevating a foreign soldier. She said it without any particular judgment in her voice, as if she were reporting whether, "Are you," Cole said, "being sentimental?" She looked at him. The room was nearly empty now, and the low lights made the shadows longer, and she was close enough that he could see the precision in her amber eyes, the way they moved when she was thinking. "The Sorvani do not prize sentimentality," she said. "We prize judgment, the ability to identify what is genuinely valuable and hold it correctly." She paused. "What I am doing has nothing to do with sentiment." Cole waited. "You are genuinely valuable," she said. Very simply and very directly, the way she said everything. "That is not sentiment, that is an assessment." He held the look and did not say anything immediately, because the thing rising in his chest needed a moment before he trusted his voice to carry only what he intended. "Thank you," he said finally. It was not enough, and they both knew it, but it was honest, and honest was what he had. She tilted her head slightly, the Sorvani gesture for acknowledged, and turned to leave, and Cole watched her walk away through the emptying hall and stood still for a long moment after she had gone. Outside Vea's door, later standing in the quiet corridor with the station settling into its night rhythms around him, he thought about what it meant to be genuinely seen by someone who had no reason to pretend. It was not a feeling he had much experience with. It was not entirely comfortable, but it was real, and he had long ago decided that real was always better than comfortable. He stood his post, he breathed, he waited for tomorrow. Tomorrow, he had come to understand, was going to be significant. He just did not know yet how completely. It was going to change everything. A formal announcement was set for the third hour of the morning session, which in the diplomatic station schedule meant a time when the light from the artificial ceiling panels was at its most official, and the hall was arranged in the precise configuration that said this was not a conversation, but a declaration. Cole did not know exactly what was coming. He had been told through an attendant to attend the formal session in the throne room. That was all. He had dressed the same as he always did, stood the same as he always stood, and walked into the room with the quiet, professional attention he carried everywhere. General Petra Ops was already there. She was standing with the Earth Coalition diplomatic delegation on the far side of the room, and when Cole entered, she found him with her eyes immediately, and the expression on her face was one he had never seen on her before. Not alarmed exactly, more like someone standing near something larger than they had anticipated and reassessing their position relative to it. Cole gave her a brief nod. She pressed her lips together and gave him one back. The Sorvani court filled the room in the deliberate, unhurried way of people who understood that arriving at exactly the right pace was itself a form of power. 43 nobles, the same ones from the dinner, plus another 15 he had not seen before, probably drawn from the Queen's senior council. They arranged themselves in a formation that Cole's briefing files would have called a witness assembly, which meant that whatever happened today would be formally witnessed and recorded and could not later be undone. That detail stayed with him. Vea entered from a side door and took her formal position near the throne. She found Cole across the room with the same directness she had always used when locating him in a crowd. The quick, certain scan of someone who had gotten used to knowing where he was. She held his gaze for a second. Her expression was composed and unreadable, in the way she had fully mastered, but her eyes said something he could not quite name. He thought it might be warning, or apology, or possibly both. Then Queen Solara entered, and the room changed. She wore the full formal dress of the Sorvani crown for the first time since Cole had arrived at the station. He understood now why formal occasions required a different category of preparation. She was already a powerful presence in a plain room in ordinary clothes, in the full regalia of her office, with the deep blue layered formal wear and the single strip of crown metal at her temple, and the precise way every element of her appearance had been arranged to say exactly what it was meant to say. She was extraordinary. She took the throne. The room went completely still. She began to speak in Sorvani, and Cole's understanding of the language was minimal enough that he caught only individual words: protection, debt, value, the word Vareth, which he now knew, daughter, crown. Then she shifted into standard without pausing, and every word from that point landed in the room with perfect clarity. The human fighter Cole Merritt has served the crown of the Sorvani Empire with a quality that the Sorvani court recognizes as rare in any species, she said. In the attack of the 22nd night, he placed himself between a weapon discharge and the princess without hesitation or calculation. This action is on record. The court has witnessed the account. The medical documentation confirms the injury he sustained. Silence. The Sorvani crown formally designates Cole Merritt as bound protector of Princess Vaya. This is a court standing. It carries the full recognition of the throne. He is not a hired guardian. He is not a contracted employee of the Earth Coalition placed temporarily in our service. She paused to let that settle. He stands under the direct protection and acknowledgement of the crown. Any action taken against him is an action taken against the throne itself. It was not loud, but it was everywhere, moving through the assembled nobles like a current of water. Petra made a sound that was not quite a word. Cole stood still and breathed in, kept his face exactly neutral. Then Solara looked at him directly, and the formal tone of her voice shifted into something quieter and more precise. Beyond the court designation, she said, I am issuing a personal claim. Under Sorvani custom, the fighter stands within my direct personal interest. This is not a political statement. It is not a diplomatic arrangement. It is a personal declaration made before the full court, and it is irrevocable by Sorvani law once spoken. She held his gaze without any of the careful distance she had maintained in every previous setting. Cole Merritt stands as mine to protect, as mine to acknowledge, as mine in the full meaning of the Sorvani personal claim, which this court and every court in this empire is bound to recognize. The room was absolutely silent. Cole thought about several things at once. He thought about his briefing files and the section on Sorvani personal claims, which he had read once and not anticipated ever needing to understand deeply. He thought about Petra's expression, which he could see from the corner of his eye had moved past alarmed and was now in territory he did not have a name for. He thought about the conversation in the hall after the court dinner and the one in the receiving chamber before it and the first audience in the formal room, and all of the small moments between them that had added up to something he had been careful not to name. Then he looked at Solara, sitting in her throne in the full authority of her office with her amber eye steady on him, and he made a decision. He crossed the room. The court watched. Nobody moved. The silence was the kind that happens when everyone in a room has simultaneously stopped breathing. He stopped at the appropriate formal distance from the throne, which the briefing files had described as close enough to speak quietly and far enough to show respect. "Your Majesty," he said, not a question. "Yes." He kept his voice level and clear, the same way he kept it when he was saying something true that needed to be heard, exactly as it was. "I understand what a personal claim means in your culture. I read about it, and I want to be clear in front of this court and in front of my own delegation that I am not standing here because I was claimed. I'm standing here because I choose to." A beat of silence. "There is a difference," he said. Something moved through her expression, the door opening the same way it had in every conversation since the beginning, but wider now than it had ever been. "Yes," she said quietly, "there is." He reached out, careful and deliberate, and held his hand open between them. Palm up, a human gesture, not a Sorvani one, an offer rather than a claim. She looked at it for a moment. Then she placed her hand in his. The court reacted. Cole heard it but did not look away from her. She did not look away from him. Her hand was cool and her grip was precise and certain, and he thought in the clear, simple way of a person who had finally stopped managing a feeling and was just letting himself have it, that this was the most honest thing that had happened to him in a very long time. Behind him, Thea made a sound that was quiet and brief and might have been the most genuine laugh he had ever heard. From her, Petra Oak said in a tone that somehow contained an entire career's worth of professionalism and approximately 3 seconds of completely losing her composure. "I am going to need to send a very long message to command." The court buzzed with the sound of 43 nobles and 15 council members trying to process what they had just witnessed. Some of them looked scandalized, some looked uncertain. A few, the ones Cole had spoken with at the dinner, looked like they were revising an earlier assessment and finding the new version more interesting than the old one. Cole did not pay attention to any of it. He was looking at the Queen, who was looking back at him with the open and unguarded expression of someone who had spent 22 years being exactly what her position required her to be, and who had found entirely unexpectedly one person in the galaxy who saw past all of it and stayed. "Anyway, you are going to be very difficult to explain to my counsel," she said, quietly, in the voice she used when she was not performing for the room. "I imagine so," he said. "They will have many concerns." "They'll get used to it," he said. "People usually do." The almost smile that crossed her face was wider than anything he had seen before, and she did not contain it this time. She let it stay. Outside the station's hull, the galaxy went on being vast and complicated and full of politics and borders and the long, difficult work of different species learning to share the same sky. Somewhere in the Earth Coalition's command structure, a very confused series of messages was about to begin, circulating through channels that had no existing protocol for this situation. None of that mattered very much right now in this room. What mattered was the hand holding his, and the honest eyes that had decided, after a long and careful examination, that he was worth keeping. Cole Merritt, who had never once in 6 years of service filed a complaint, decided that this assignment had turned out to be the best one of his life. He held on, and she held on, and the room gradually, reluctantly, beautifully adjusted itself around them.